Hello. How are you? Recently, I got my hands on a set of Gouache. Arteza, please sponsor me. Even though I've never had the chance to use Gouache, yes, even in art school. Don't bully me, please. I've taken an interest to it in the last month, and I want to see how it works. So I decided to deviate from the usual bookish stuff for this video and draw something more video game related. For those of you who don't know, this is Ling. She's one of the more than 200 playable characters in the mobile tower defense game Arknights, which is a game I've been playing for more than a year now. Again, please sponsor me. A couple of weeks ago, Ling was added to the game alongside the global server's 2.5 anniversary event Invitation to Wine, which gave players the opportunity to obtain her and a couple of others who were also added. The thing is, Ling is a limited character, which means the chances of obtaining her are stupid rare. I got her on my second pull, which I will confess I was not expecting at all, but because of that I promised myself that I would draw her to celebrate, so here we are. As with my last video, I don't really have much to say outside of the creative process, so I'm probably just gonna butt in here and there, but I hope you still enjoy this time-lapse of me painting, and yeah, let's get into it. As you could see in the beginning, I already had the sketch down, and then I went in with the underpainting. I went for the background first, and for this piece, I was actually influenced by a scene from a recent promotional video for the event I just mentioned. I'm not sure if I can show anything, but there's a scene with like dark green smoke and everything, and there's dramatic lighting and stuff. Delicious. Anyway, the video is there if you know where to look. So, a brief aside on gouache. I first heard about it in high school, but I don't ever remember using it. I'd experiment with all of the sorts of other things I'd find in the classroom, like the inks and those pigmented watercolors and things, but I never gravitated towards gouache. However, I did go into this painting knowing gouache had the properties of both acrylic and watercolor. It's water-soluble and behaves like watercolor, but it's opaque like acrylic, and you can stack lighter colors on top of darker ones. In other words, you can go from dark to light if you wanted to, unlike with watercolor where you pretty much have to go from light to dark. The more you know. It took a little while to figure out the background. I wanted to mimic the aforementioned smoke clouds, and as you can probably tell, it took a little while to get right. It's darker and more saturated closer to the front, but it's grayer and lighter all the way in the back, and this is something that I happened to learn in college. The farther away something is, the less saturated it will be in photographs. So that's why the clouds in the back are grayish and not black. Something I don't normally do, because I only have 2 brain cells, and they both like to do the Macarena when I'm trying to work, is work with the darkest color first and then go lighter. But I wanted to try that with the gouache. Trust the process, woo! So you can kinda see this with the smoke clouds, whatever they're called, but there's a better example coming up in a few moments. I put down that dark teal color, and then I went in with a lighter shade to add the highlights. I did debate tinkering with it more, but I knew I shouldn't touch the background anymore or risk fumbling it. Gouache is an opaque medium and you can cover up your mistakes better than watercolor, as I quickly learned, but I still didn't want to risk it. So here's the better example I was talking about. Again, I put down the darkest shade first, and then I mixed the colors to make them brighter and went from there. I did struggle with it at first, but I quickly got the hang of it. If you see Ling's character art, you'll notice that her hair is pretty blue with just a touch of purple. But because the background has a greenish tone, I wanted to keep with that color when painting Ling herself. Otherwise, it was just gonna be an eyesore if I threw the whole color theory thing out the window. As such, I adjusted the colors accordingly to make it work here. Understanding how colors and lighting work is your best friend, folks. I rendered each section individually to get the highlights and the shading down, and also so I don't forget later, because that would be embarrassing. I put down the lighter colors with the green background in mind, as you'll see with some of the highlights later on. Also, you've probably seen it already, but ignore my weird brush grip. I slept through those classes, nobody in my family knows how to hold a pencil the right way, and I do not understand how everyone else is able to make it work without making the pencil unstable in 5 seconds and having it fly everywhere. I don't understand how you do it. So, as I said earlier, I was able to obtain Ling despite her being a limited character, and she's a lot of fun already. I can now live my dreams of obliterating my enemies with dragons, so wait, what anyways? Also, she's a poet who really likes wine, so... Honestly, what more do you want? Not to mention the fact that I live for her character design, honestly. There's a few more characters who are coming to the global server in the next few months that I'm very excited about, but if we're talking favorite characters that are already in the global server, then I'd have to go with either La Pluma or Astesia. It's not because I like birds, what are you talking about? Anyway, here I am finishing up the hair, and I think if you're not so pedantic about everything and overthinking every brushstroke, it helps. At least for me. The most freeing experience of my life. I don't know why, but I've always had a particular fondness for rendering hair. It's so fun. Even watching it while editing puts a smile on my face. Is that weird? Anyways. So here we have more of the same, putting down base colors and then shading those sections accordingly and trying not to overthink and make your brain implode. Thanks to the magic of gouache, if a section turned out to be too transparent, I went over it again. Then again, I'm pretty sure the same applies for all paint, so I don't know what I'm on. Fun fact, I originally had no idea what the composition would be going into this painting, but the video I mentioned earlier was the inspiration I needed. Even then, however, I needed to do some serious brainstorming to figure out just what I wanted. I do wish I was able to include more of the staff that Link carries around, but it is what it is. What else can I say that's not just me rambling? I don't know. How's your day going? I have some quality black tea with me, so my day is going great so far. Can't go wrong with tea. You can see here that I tried adding in the little pink tips in Ling's hair, specifically at the end of her bangs or something like that, and I initially tried doing it with a mix of the red and the pink paint, but it ended up being too washed up. I did go back into that towards the end with more success, so you'll see that too. Coming up in a couple of moments or so is an instance of me struggling with the lighter colors. Whenever I found myself in a pinch, I'd use a bit of the white paint, and usually it ended up working out. I didn't put too much, of course, because I didn't want to go overboard. Here's me putting down some darker colors, cause I wasn't satisfied with having that teal color be the darkest shade on her coat. So I went in with a dark gray, which was a little gray for me initially, but I don't dislike it. The sleeve on the right is probably what gave me the most grief about this painting, but I was eventually able to salvage it. Ling's tail wasn't that hard to render despite the dragon scales, which is something that I don't normally render to begin with. I think what really helped was being cognizant of where the light source was and how it would interact with the scales, since it's not like most other surfaces. And I did try to remedy that big spot of darkness on her tail. Again, trust the process. I can hear 18-year-old me screaming in my head as I say that. If you listen very closely, you can hear the impatient side of me screaming too. My favorite song, honestly. I listen to it every day. In fact, it was my #1 song on Spotify last year. I'm joking, it's not on Spotify, that would be terrifying. Unlike the other sections, I approached the skin by blocking out individual sections instead of putting down the darkest color for the entire area. So basically putting one color down here and another one there. I think I started with my usual approach, but midway I said, screw it, I don't want to mess this up. While we're here, I also want to stress the importance of the face if you're drawing people in particular. Proportions can play a big part depending on the degree of realism you're aiming for, but the expression more often than not can make or break a piece and the execution of the face as a whole. For instance, you can have a character looking determined or angry or happy, but it all means nothing if they end up looking sad or constipated instead. Barring the fact that the rest of the drawing might look absolutely spectacular. It's actually part of the reason I get so hung up on the face from time to time, even though I know I probably shouldn't be. After everything was said and done, it was time for the finishing touch, which is coming up shortly. The outline. Because who doesn't love making everything look crisp, like Oreo cookies if they're not dipped in milk? No shade to Oreos, I love them either way. I didn't want to outline with just black paint straight from the tube, so I mixed the black with one of the dark blues and one of the green colors. The end result is a very deep bluish color that isn't quite black, which is useful if you don't want to do outline colors that aren't pure black. So I went over everything I needed to with that color, and I actually shaded bits of the hair that I thought needed a bit more depth to them. Spicy. There are some other details on Ning's outfit that I don't think I got on film, but I did make sure to add them in before I finished the painting. That being said though, I'm pretty sure I still missed a few. Hopefully it's not the end of the world. Ha ha ha! All in all, I actually had a pretty fun first experience with gouache, despite being intimidated at first. Naturally, I had my reservations, but I'm very happy with how this piece turned out. Which means I don't have to cry into my sketchbook. Yay! If you're on the fence about whether to start using gouache, I'd give it a 10 out of 10 would recommend again. Especially given that it's a little more forgiving than watercolor is. And I didn't get it on film, but the texture once it dries is nice. Very nice. So yeah, I would recommend going for it. Anyway, that's the end of this video. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and give me a lifetime supply of tea or something. You can never have too much tea. Tea. Anyway, I post new videos every Monday, and I talk about books and art and stuff, so if you're interested, stay tuned. And yeah, thanks for watching!